It's also about going back to the basics and looking at water as such a precious element. How can we give it the importance it deserves? And perhaps that's not through a price tag, as you say, perhaps it's through the heart, perhaps it's through other elements.
I never thought I could become an artist until I found water. And it forced me to become an artist because I was so emotional about water, everything that happened to water today. When I was studying design, there was a very strong culture of sustainability, how to solve SDG issues. And it was then I actually had environmental awakening, even if you were dealing with very difficult audience. And if you were able to say something that you see the spark in their eyes, and they felt it, and you were already making impact by planting a seed. Some indigenous languages, water has several different names. They have their own identities, right? And the lake it's a different identity from the pond and from the river. You see them as almost like different animals, and they're all living entities, right? This painting literally symbolizes to me, I gave the stories like, because it's black background and it's white ink, therefore it's like the river of hope in the darkness.
Hi, Charlotte. Welcome to the Shades of Life podcast, and thank you for joining me from China today.
Thank you, Ingrid.
So, Charlotte, you are a wonderful artist, an advocate, and an entrepreneur working around the theme of water in particular, which I am very interested in because water is an essential element, as we all know it, the source of life on our blue planet. And it holds many symbolisms and plays a crucial role in connecting us with the natural world and fostering a collective commitment to environmental conservation and sustainability, which I know are topics you have at heart. We will discover the inspiration and motivations behind your work throughout this conversation. But to start with, because I love people with a diverse background, can you tell us where you are from? Because I know you were in Hong Kong very recently, but I know you also have ties to several continents. So can you take us through each place that matters in your life?
Of course. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's really a privilege. And also we met through while I was in China, actually, 2 years ago through the Wamyak, right? The Artivist exhibition. It was my first time getting in touch with this community of sustainability, but youth, around the youth sector. I didn't start as a youth activist, but an artist in the beginning. And at the time I was in Geneva. So obviously I'm originally from China and moved to Canada when I was young with my family. And then I just kept on moving.
Yeah.
I think there is, just my focus was more like to find myself. I changed so many professions. Like I was studying physics, but then every summer I was working in a new field in physics, just kind of like a sponge. I want to get like all the experiences possible. But in the end, I just move on to the next thing. I was really confused. And then after I graduated, I moved to the UK for my master's. London's wonderful, we all know.
Yeah, that's
beautiful place for artists. Yeah, I really, really miss it. But at the same time, I was like missing nature from Canada and everything. I was like super overstimulated. I have the same feeling like in most big cities.
Yeah.
And then at the time, Geneva was kind of my refuge. I was working there in the summer, but actually after I graduated, I just moved there. And slowly I started picking up my art while I was working. And then during COVID, I just was creating more and more. We all know what happened, and like we're closed down, and my way of confronting to my emotions and the void silence was painting. And so it just happened like that, and I was exhibiting, and then I created more and more. My paintings are like circles, so it's I sometimes I joke about how it's like I'm a turtle, like a little bit nomad, and I make turtle eggs, and it's like brown. Yeah, so that's why, like the countries, they just so happen like that because of my education, my path. And more recently, Hong Kong. I visited Hong Kong 3 times already, and I'm going back in 2 days. This place kind of stole my heart because you've got the city and nature all in one, a little bit like Switzerland, but more warmer.
Oh, that's good to know. I've never been. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's also Chinese. So that is a very special part for me. But it's not fully China. It's very expat friendly. So there's got the art and science. So I know we're gonna get into more of that. So
Yeah,
I'm very happy to
yeah,
dig
yeah,
into the
yeah, yeah,
details.
yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, that's where I am. But also like my stuff is obviously still in Geneva. I think it's always been a dream for me to have an anchor, a base in Asia, preferably in China. So yeah.
Incredible. So you have a foot on almost every continent, which is interesting. So regarding your artistic background, so it's interesting to see that you've almost been, looking for what's the right thing for you for a long time. So I wanted to ask you, how did you become an artist? Do you consider yourself like as a full-time artist?
Yeah, right now I usually introduce myself as artist by profession, but my side hustle is meeting of waters. So right here. Like, where's my finger?
Yeah.
Right. This is So, when I'm on Zoom, I'm fully representing this initiative because this is the value which my art represents. It's also starting this year, I decided to separate what I do a lot of things like how we met, like advocacy through different organizations, governmental or non-governmental, um, grassroots. So all of this is I do next to my creating practicing time. So I decided to separate the two things, my self expression, which we do think that's what artists do, and how we connect with a piece of artwork is very subjective, right? But then my work, I have to say that I've been supported by fundings, sometimes in the beginning, of course, like everything I do for free, but more and more there's donations, there's sometimes funds. So I decided, okay, I need to do things like an adult. Because I mean, like,
Yeah,
of course, I
we'll get
love
to that
to,
phase.
yeah, I mean, I love to keep things simple and everything goes into my personal bank account, but like, and also on another level, on a professional level, if I want to make real impact, it would be much better if I decentralize myself from the organization, so people don't see as, okay, it's a Charlotte NGO, it's but it's created by an artist, which is already a very unique thing. But then our hope is also to engage more artists, right, and our cultural practitioner to contribute to the water issues, because it's very complex, because we need like different domains to come in. So that's where I am right now. I will introduce myself as an artist, but of course it took me a very long time, as I explained, from physics into design, and I never thought I could become an artist until I found water, and it forced me to become an artist because I was so emotional about water, everything that happened to water today and what needs to be done. I think only through emotions, and like to me, art are these emotions, even though we have different categories, but it's in the end, it's a very emotional expression, and the best artwork is the one that make you cry. That's what I believe.
Oh, I think we know someone in common who makes people cry for his poetry. He was the first guest on the podcast, by the way.
Water Island.
Yeah. So we are definitely going to talk more about that with this conversation, Charlotte. But as you are in China at the moment, I wanted to ask you, have your Chinese roots influenced your work in any way? Because, Chinese art is so prevalent. I mean, there is so much to it. I actually have a book that I've put here from a French artist who spent 10, 15 years in China. And she has a wonderful story, and she learned how to master ink, but, with these massive, big paintings that almost look like poems. So, we all have Chinese ink in mind. So, yeah, have your Chinese roots influenced your work in any way?
It started my work, really.
Okay.
I consider myself being pretty westernized from my education and immigration background. And, no matter how much that your external environment change, when it comes to art, it's the authentic expression. So when I started it, I didn't even know it was, I was using Chinese ink, of course, but then I didn't even know my artwork appears to be Chinese. I just did what I wanted to do. So until some collectors, or I was surrounded by a community of people who know very well Asia or China. I wonder why, right? I mean, like that was my appreciators in Switzerland. And I also, around this time, because of COVID outbreak, I couldn't go back to my families in China. I was separated for even before COVID. I wasn't going back home regularly, so it was in total like about 4 years I didn't go back. Yeah, actually only last year, September, I spent enough time in China just to feel I caught up with the country. I felt rooted, and also I explored China as an adult for the first time, and had my own friends circles, and explored contemporary traditional Chinese art. I was mind blown. I was like, I felt a little bit ashamed for what I had done in Switzerland. I felt like I was, because Chinese was such a minority there, and I didn't realize I represented Chinese culture, and I was like, no, this is I need more substance and education, that's a part of me feeling very a lot of respect for China, and also appreciation for my roots. There are a lot of impressive artists in China, and innovating the techniques, the ink, Chinese artists are usually very technical. They are good at making things very beautiful. But then the Western arts it's another, direction, right? It's more the philosophy, the ideas, and there's a background, our history, the theories, goes into that. So it's kind of like two completely different systems. And then for me, my background is not only, it's also, I have a scientific background as well. I have my own stories to tell, and China somehow is who I am, and it pours out like that. I try not to interfere too much with what I want to express. Like,
that's really interesting to get your perspective between the Eastern and Western world. Only you can bring this to the table. That's interesting. So talking of the scientific link, because as you said, you have an unusual profile as an artist because you have a scientific background too. So can you tell us more about that? And I also wanted, to ask you, how do you combine your scientific background and artistic vision in what you do, like the creative and the logical, if I summarize it very simply?
My science background was physics, and it's very general physics. I had practices in particle physics and medical physics. I didn't go really deep. Obviously, I only did my bachelor's, right? And I have intern and working research experience in those fields. Mostly, it's basically, I'm being honest here, it's not a PhD interview, so I don't have to brag. So I actually literally just was working with people who are experts in the field, and what I do was just coding, contributing to building a software for the experiments. And of course, I would read their paper and get to know what they're doing. So getting a taste of the field and what it's like to be a physicist. And of course, coding and also the technical knowledge, even though it was pretty shallow, it was laying a foundation of a lot of things, what I'm doing now. And also basically physics really train you how to see the world in a physicist way. Basically meaning you kind of, I think most people I talk to or physicists used to be, we share the same idea. Once you were a physicist, you have this worldview. You're very easily zooming out of the situation or the system, the scenario, and you can see things in patterns. You're very good at spotting patterns, right? And then theorizing things, maybe a little bit too much. And I see that being very helpful when I was in design. I discovered that I was a better thinker than most people who don't have the kind of scientific training, who are, of course, they're better at making stuff and getting things done. We have different skill sets, but I was trained as a better thinker to think more systemically. And when we want to solve a problem, I would think a bit more, what is the root cause, instead of just finding solutions for the symptoms, right? And I think that goes back into me finding out water is really the root cause of climate and ecology and everything. It's dismissed because it's so common. It's also so complex, the sciences of it. I think biggest problem with water, why water is not well communicated, is because water scientists are scattered in all different kinds of fields. Like everything is water, atmosphere, and then we have meteorologists. They're in their own bubble, and then the groundwater, right? And the oldest form of water is, then there are the geophysicists. They're also in their own bubble. And then we have environmental engineers dealing with the drinking fresh water. And then we have the ocean scientists. They all have their own community. And then I feel like my role here today, especially after having funded Meeting of Waters, is really, I also discovered, hey, I'm able to talk to all of them. I can understand their work. I'm not necessarily participating in their research, but I can read their paper. I can synthesize ideas, and basically bridging the science communication part to the public. Of course, I would describe my artistic approach. It's very different. How I connected to water is actually just me and water. It's like conversation. It's kind of like an indigenous connection with the land. And then you hear what water needs. You hear water being in pain. And then you discover everything we've done to cause this pain for water, right? I mean, I'm not analyzing water or observing water, but I'm actually becoming one with water, realizing I am made of water too. And I feel water's pain and all the emotions. So it's a very different approach. And now I'm in contact with all kinds of scientists, and obviously I am now really, really different, but I'm not, I still have that part in me, and I hope that, you know, art can be the glue or the bridge that brings everyone together, the water, right? Different continents.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I love the link you make, you know, that everything is interconnected, because as you say, sometimes we tend to separate things when everything works together in reality as one, you know, massive ecosystem. Even me, when I started this podcast, someone told me, "Oh, why do you cover so many diverse topics? Why don't you focus on just one, like energy?" I'm like, because everything is connected. I can't limit myself to, you know, just wildlife or just water or just, you know, energy. Everything is connected. And I make it my own challenge, you know, to connect the dots between everything. But I really love also what you said about, you know, your artistic work has that kind of intuitive feeling about it. And I find that very important because the scientific knowledge matters, but the intuition, relationship with the water matters too. And it's how do you combine the two? You know, like we have a brain made of two hemispheres and it works together. You see what I mean? So thank you for that. So obviously you focus on water in your work as a central theme. So overall, I wanted to ask you why water in particular? How did you decide to focus on this element as an artistic inspiration? Was there a starting point when you said to yourself, I'm going to focus on water from now on?
Good question. I had always been interested in water since I was young, but not to the degree that I always knew that, oh, I'm going to be a water engineer or something. But, you know, like as a child, you have a career dream, or maybe I will be a writer, and then didn't expect my parents would change country and change language system and everything. It was like, and then I just went with the flow, and then until I realized, hey, I wanted to be an artist. But then I was always practicing art, you know, just kind of before an artist realized they had their own, the true. So I wasn't trained professionally as an artist, of course, like the usual path and of art school, but it was coming in the middle. Because of water, I became an artist, right? But then I was always exploring water as a scientist. Hydrodynamics was at the time my favorite subject in physics. The visualization was so nice. But it wasn't like a field that got me to devote myself and have a career in. You know, I don't think I could work as a water engineer. I tried with AI and I thought, okay, generative art is really cool. To make simulations of water. I had those thoughts as well, but you know, of course, it's more fun to play with real water. When I was studying design, there was a very strong culture of sustainability, how to solve SDG issues, and it was then I actually had a environmental awakening. During that project, I was working alone, and I wanted to make something with water, and I was first I was like, hey, water is so cool. There's so many anomalies or unusual properties about water. I could make a water computer, or water this and water that. And then I went into Spain, and then I meditated for 3 days, and then I came out, I was like, I changed my project completely. I just was feeling the pain of water, what it was going through under our climate, under our humanity. So back then, I already had that experience of feeling this pain, but it was only when I was living by the waters in Switzerland and having everyday experiences with water, and I thought it was so sufficient, the emotions, and I was just creating all the time. So yeah, so it was always water. I guess Chinese culture has a very strong connection with water. We use water as a metaphor for a lot of things. Yeah, and it's also a country that controls very well water, engineering projects, modern, but also historic. It was really far ahead. And of course, there are really good ones in the past, like very harmonious, architecture design, mimicking nature. So I think part of that can be, it's from my roots, my heritage, that I have this sensitivity, my indigeneity. So yeah, I don't know if that answers anything that you asked for.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely great. Quite fascinating. I was just thinking, you are a great example of having tried to find something that speaks to you. And, we all take that journey, like, what do I want to do in life? And we all make our own explorations and discoveries, but it's always important to listen to yourself. And I think you've done that very well. And it can sometimes feel like a painful journey.
Yeah.
But, if the place where you arrive is the place where you feel at home and where you feel aligned with yourself, that was worth the journey and the pain for sure. So thank you for sharing this with us. Looking at the symbolisms of water, and I know there are many, and you've just said, water is associated with many things in China, so perhaps you could tell us a few about that. But so water is often symbolically associated with life, renewal, or nourishment, for example, to cite only a few, because, there are many, many symbolisms associated with water. What symbols associated with water do you have the most at heart yourself, and why? If you pick a few, we don't have to make it any complicated at all.
In Chinese culture, there's saying that the highest good is like water. So one day I realized that, it's the same level of, this is original. You can quote me on that, or just decided to cut it off. Okay, and one day I realized that water has the same statue in Chinese culture as Christ in Judeo-Christian traditions. So yeah, it's really like the highest good. If you think about the purest form of goodness with no sin, and that is the original state of water. It was made as a gift from God to nourish life, to give life, to host all kinds of diversities on planet Earth. So it was the original, it's like, wow. And I think if you communicate that as a priest about Jesus, and then it can also make a lot of sense. So I think that's the symbolism that came up to my mind.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, that's very true. We are a blue planet, as you mentioned earlier. Ourselves, we are made primarily of water. It's essential, and yeah, it's an essential pure element for sure. Yeah, I love the association, Charlotte. So if we look now at the artistic expressions of water, artists throughout history have been inspired by the beauty, the power, the fluidity of water as a subject for their artworks, and it has been depicted in various art forms. So I wanted to ask you, how does it translate for you personally into your work? What techniques and art forms, styles do you use to depict water? We can see a painting behind you.
Yeah. So I started to, innovate a little bit outside of painting. So this one behind you see is with Chinese ink, the black. Oh, actually, the blue ink is also some form of acrylic. Aquatic. No, aquarelle. No, watercolor.
Yeah, watercolor.
Watercolor. Yeah. So it's same form, whereas acrylic is more thick. So I have one form of art that is kind of watery, and the other one that is more heavily painted and very bright colors. And so how I paint is very loose brush. So in comparison to Western art, where we have oil or just very thick brush strokes, my art is fluid. It doesn't have to be like water fluid, but at least the pigment is fluid, so it really flow, and the process is really loose. So you're not controlling everything. You're not controlling the outcome of how the color looks. You kind of allow it to flow, and then you work on the flow, the shape of flow itself. So a lot of times it's a form of collaboration, I feel, with water. And you also, if I were a control freak, I wouldn't be choosing this medium, right?
Yeah.
And we also taught me to let go, because sometimes I don't like what I created. I don't like it, but the more it's funny thing, I wanted to say keep it between ourselves, but it's a podcast.
No, that's great. I love it. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Like the work I don't like sometimes are, of course, they're liked by somebody else, right? So sometimes it sells pretty well. But yeah, and more recently, when I'm in China, so I do most of my paintings in Switzerland, but then in China, I started to explore ceramics, porcelain. So I was making sculptures. It started in London already when I was studying, and I discovered, hey, I can feel water when I'm working with clay as well. And then I will make shapes that are just, for me, it represents a certain type of water. So, yeah, and it looks like mushrooms or coral. So that's another medium I'm using right now. But also, like on my painting, I'm starting to add textures that also represents flow. Yeah, so it's these are my choices right now. I'm trying to also get back with data viz. So that's a more technical medium, and it's not very comfortable to work with.
But you push yourself a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yes, ceramics, and quite organic forms of ceramics, from what I understand from you.
Feels good.
Yeah. So, I like the next question because I'm all about color. So, regarding the beauty of water, so through art, an artist can inspire viewers to appreciate the beauty of water. What about its associated color palette? What colors do you like to use in your work? Do you have a large color palette, a narrow one, colors you prefer to work with? That would be interesting to know.
Yeah, I have of course I have all shades of blue I can find in my in
Really?
my palette. Yeah, there's some there's strange names also. The can repeat. There's some Persian blue or climb blue, of course, and then there's sky blue and ocean blue. Oh, it's just they name it very, very nice, and some are very. I mean, you can tell there are blues that are a bit cold, a bit warm, so you don't. I don't overuse a lot of colors in my paintings. I kind of keep it. I think there's some design elements when I'm painting there as well. I don't want it to overcomplicate things, but I did have a very colorful painting about plastics where I used red and yellow and purple, like all at the same time. And those are the colors that I don't use very often.
Yeah.
Very special occasions if I were making one. And I would select the color that looked kind of harmonious together. And then I use a lot of gold and black. So black is for me is like it's not color. I like to I enjoy making things without thinking about color, just the shape and the texture, just go with black and white. And then gold is gold is kind of everything everywhere now. Like I went to India and then I came back, everything I touched became gold. That was the story.
So India is the culprit for gold. That's
Oh yeah.
interesting.
India was a big source of inspiration, and then it became my golden face, the start. And still, like golden black looks pretty good behind me. So like it's all in my background. Like
Yeah, I love it. It works so, so well. Yeah, love it. Thank you for sharing this, Charlotte.
thank you.
So let's move to the emotional connection that we have with water. I think you said a few things about that earlier, and we know that water and emotions work hand in hand. So art has the power to evoke emotions and create a deep emotional connection with viewers. Then when we associate art and water, two emotional connectors, because water is an element that is often associated with emotions. I was wondering, when preparing this interview, does it mean the emotional response to your art is tenfold because your central element is water and then obviously it's artistic? And what type of response or emotional connection are you getting or trying to get through your art with your audience? What are the emotions that you get from your audience?
Um,
Do you understand that?
yes, of course. I think my default state, with is like everyone, we can't really control how emotional we feel each day, or negative or positive, right? But when I'm working on my art or on NGO, I had to activate this special emotions about water to
Yeah.
be really authentic, to be representative for my work. Sometimes I wake up and I might feel angry, and like every other human being, I wonder, what am I doing with all these things, right? Am I like, is there something wrong with me? Blah, blah, blah. And then I would talk to a friend who's like me, or who's working on these environment stuff, and then I just feel like, okay, I can feel it again. It's flowing back again, and then it helps to align my work. I didn't know emotion has this power, really, because I sometimes we can feel overwhelmed by emotions, and negative emotions especially. And sometimes we also want to numb our emotions because it's more practical sometimes not to feel anything for a while. So emotion are it's like too much water, too little water, the same stories, right? But in the end, I felt like because emotion is such a medium to transmit knowledge, it cannot be neglected. And especially with the issues that we're dealing with, emotion is really the bridge. If we could transmit a message through emotions, and it's really going to be remembered and it's making an impact, even if you were dealing with very difficult audience. Let's say if someone who's completely not in your tribe or not a generation or social groups, and if you were able to say something that you see the spark in their eyes and they felt it, and yeah, and you're already making impact by planting a seed. So I think it's much more effective than I don't know. I cannot argue, like sometimes intellectual communication is important too, but emotional connections are often neglected.
Yeah, I love that. And, while you were talking, I was thinking, sometimes we have such linear ways of thinking. And I love this conversation we are having about water because, water brings fluidity. And you were also talking about releasing control, because we all know that emotions, we all go through an ebb and flow of emotions. And as you say, sometimes we try to control that, but we can make the analogy with how we lead our lives, how we lead businesses, and also what brings issues in our ways of living, because we can be such control freaks of everything. And we're going to talk about water and the cost of water later, which I find interesting. But it's, learning to release and accept that fluidity, that ebb and flow of life in everything that we do, because we would be a lot more successful, in fact, if we do that. And as you say, we all have our days when, we have more energy than others, or our mood is higher, and some days it's lower. And it's normal. It's about accepting these flows, because this is what ultimately brings us back to alignment, and just accepting that these movements exist, right? So that's really interesting. So moving a little bit more to the environment, which I know will be a really interesting discussion with you. So obviously, water is essential for all forms of life on Earth, serving as a critical component of ecosystems and supporting biodiversity. And artistic representations of water often highlight its importance as a life-giving force, portraying the interconnectedness between water, living organisms, and the environment. So I wanted to ask you, are you inspired by this life energy, and how does it translate into your work? I was thinking with this question, perhaps looking at it from a movement perspective, just looking at what you have behind you, there is so much movement in it.
Yeah, I think movement is really the signature of water. It's movements. Water drives movements. Water is alive because of these movements, and the temperature differences even slightly move water from cold to hot. And then and there's water everywhere in the air, therefore the same movement in the air is written in the same mathematical forms as the water in our rivers and in our seas, and even the galaxies, the black holes. It's all in movement. So it's absolutely fascinating. Sometimes I felt like it's literally the fingerprint of God, how this whole universe creation was made. So I'm totally inspired on an intellectual level about all emotions, and seeing, change can happen, the positive and negative, through this motion.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. So, looking at environmental awareness and in the context of environmental conservation, we know that water-themed arts can raise awareness about the importance of protecting water resources and promoting sustainable water management practices. I know you have been involved in various projects supporting the sustainable development goals. That's also how we met in the past. And as you mentioned, you are the co-founder of Meeting of Waters, a Geneva-based NGO. So I wanted to ask you, do you consider yourself an artist activist? And why is activism or artivism important to you?
Right. I definitely consider myself as an artivist, not simply an activist. I feel like the art movement in the way of activism is slightly softer, it's more subtle, and I feel like it's my style. I don't really have a very loud voice, and also like yeah, of course I can be very angry, but I rather.
I don't think activism should be associated with angriness, by the way. It's more about taking action, isn't it?
Right. I think normally like the usual concept of activists where, you know, they're in protest, right? I mean, very.
I think you can be an activist in different ways and actually like the way you do it. So tell us about that.
Of course. I have is someone I really respect, an entrepreneur. Her way of activism is, you know, like eating vegetarian, but also just kind of making an announcement to her dinner table. Hey, we're at COP. It makes people uncomfortable, but then it's a good way of activism, right? I mean, everyone has their own style, and for me, it's just that it's not my style to join a crowd or to be in a collective emotions. And of course, I have my own anger. Of course, I have a lot of different variety of emotions, but art is kind of like a filter, a medium to express them. And then it's in a way it's active, but then you to receive it, you also need to be active of receiving. It's imagine if a protest would be you passively receiving the message. You cannot unsee certain things, right? But then with art, and you have to, there's a layer to it. You have to actively wanting to know what it is. Otherwise, you can just simply ignore or unsee, because what is she doing anyways, right? I mean, you can just fully ignore. I mean, I don't care about people who don't care about, you know, they're not curious about my work. I just cannot convince everybody who's not ready to receive the message or the emotions, right? So that's my way of activism. But then why is activism important for my art is because I don't see my art being, you know, it's all about me. It's my talents, my career, my me, that kind of lifestyle mentality I've had for a while, and I wasn't happy, you know, like I just felt like for a little while I was living as if I was the center of the universe, a very selfish life when I only do art. And it's when I realize what is driving me to do art, what is causing me to feel these emotions, right? Of course I can have the best technique in the world. I can make a brilliant performance. I can have eloquent speeches, but it's not really about me. It's what I'm presenting. I think that's essential to me. That's why I think my even my artistic path is very unconventional. I don't confine myself in the art market, or it's not necessarily an easy path to be waiting to be discovered by someone, but I can wait already because everyone needs to hear about the story of water. So that's my answer to your questions.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And nobody has to follow, what we could perceive as this is the path to activism or this is the path to art. You can create your own. I have a friend in the US who is a great artist as well. And, he totally went out of the normal system of, art galleries and all of that to create his own path. And he sells his art brilliantly. And you don't have to follow just one classic path for sure. So you are the creative director and co-founder of Ching Theory, a studio that provides innovative solutions for water, communication, and education. Could you summarize for us what you aim to do through this studio? Because that's another arm of what you do.
Yes. So Ching Theory Studio was give birth to Medium Waters. When I started Ching Theory, was just myself, and everything goes under my artwork and consultancy, and Ching Theory is practically my handle, my name. I had like an art block of Ching Theory when I was 16. It was really cute. I was just like uploading my nerdy stuff and what I make in school and like at home, the paintings and stuff. So I continue to use it. Did not expect that I would become a physics student. I was like, oh, Ching Theory, like my theory. I still don't know what the theory is, but I got criticized once that, hey, it looks not like an art studio name. It's very yeah, it's probably too nerdy. But then I think I'm at the point where I'm re-meeting my scientific self. Because more like it's easy to critique, but then who's gonna find the solutions, right? It's always going to be I have to utilize whatever tools out there. So this is basically the beginning of Qing Theory, and Medium Waters is the non-for-profit aspect of that. And so the Qing Theory is gonna continue as my own practice, and what I do not only for water, perhaps personal exploration as well, design, furnitures, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I must say I love the name. I've always loved it. And to me, that's my perception of it. It has to do with exploration, ideation, and that's the start of any process. So I think it's a brilliant name. Please keep it.
And also the idea of theory, it's being updated each time when we have a better model, right? And the scientific paradigm.
Yeah, exactly.
That way. It's not a fixed theory, but it's continue exploring.
Yeah, I think it works really well with your both artistic and scientific background. It works with both. It really embodies who you are, I believe. So great name.
Oh, thank you.
So looking at art as an educational tool, so we know that art can serve as an educational tool to inform and educate the public about environmental issues related to water. And when we look at the water elements, as we mentioned before, it plays a crucial role in the context of climate change and climate action. And if I cite a few ways in which water can affect us, there is water scarcity and droughts, sea level rise and coastal flooding, and many parts of the world are already affected. extreme weather events such as hurricanes, floods, and storms. And every year, we are the witness of many. Water quality and pollution is very important. And if we look at ecosystems and biodiversity, climate change has profound effects on aquatic ecosystems, including coral reefs, wetlands or rivers, and many, many more. So I wanted to ask you, have you ever created any artworks relating to any of these themes?
Yeah, I have. I previously have done, those are pretty tough work to produce. Because as I explained earlier, that my work is a direct communication with water, and let's say, to produce a painting on plastic, I was not just it was not painting, I was feeling the water and then it pours out as this visualization. And I also had created a painting on deep sea mining. They all look beautiful, but I was like, oh, I was just so devastated when I was creating them. There's also another painting on water pollution called Bleeding. It wasn't planned, but then I was painting at the lake, and then in the evening when I took it back home, at the time I didn't have a studio yet, and it was the paint that was just dripped down, and then I was having a conversation about Elon Musk or something, and then it's just like the anger, the sadness, always like tear, like an open wound and bleeding. Yeah, it became like that. And so and then currently I'm conceptualizing this data visualization, right? Because when you mention this is my scientific self came back, and I was like, I want to help people understand what's the cause of this. It's because we really disrupted the water cycles that is embedded, in the ecosystem and plants. When we think about, plants, they absorb carbons, but it's not exactly the carbon that causes, carbon is only 20% in the atmosphere. It's the water vapor at 70%, and they're not being cycled, by our vegetations. We turn the earth into concrete, and then we blame, hey, it's our floods are uncontrollable, our rains are too much, and then it's because of how we disrupted the waters. And then how do we bring knowledge to people, right? Because it's very complex science. Even like a decade from now, we don't even have the modeling tools, right, to prove that this is a correct theory. And so right now we might be able to tell the full story of water and the role it plays in ecology, so that we can really focus on fixing water in our conservation and give water this, the rights and status that it deserves to be respected.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I want to say I will have an article about your work on Scarlet Thread magazine. So hopefully we can showcase a variety of your work, including more Artivism artworks like you've just described, to give people an idea of what it looks like, because you create beautiful, beautiful art. I can't stress that enough. Talking about collaboration, have you ever collaborated with, I think you did mention something about scientists or other environmental activists, local communities, or other public-private sector actors to create works that address specific water-related challenges in a collaborative and interdisciplinary manner. So have you worked with other people for, yeah.
Yes.
Can you give us some examples, perhaps?
Yeah, I will give you examples. Before I started focusing on water, I already had, but I'm not gonna. Maybe it's helpful to mention that as well, because it might get me some new jobs. I don't know.
Who knows?
So coming from science to art, right? And I had a few very special opportunity, which is to be the bridge. I was collaborating. I was facilitating a huge collaboration between CERN and RCA. And then the opportunity came out of nowhere. I was looking for an internship, and it turns out that CERN will have this like half-year-long course with RCA where the whole School of Design needs to be working with scientists from CERN to create design solutions for SDGs. So I just came at the right time, and then I recruited the scientists, and kind of like science. They're very inspired by designers who don't have a scientific background, and they love to create like science fictions, right? I mean, the scientists' role here is to bring them to the ground and then help them to solidify their ideas, vice versa. And then scientists get a lot of inspirations and also open up to a lot of worldly issues that oftentimes science is like, if you it's not environmental science, then you can live pretty comfortable life, I guess. It's a pretty exciting field, to work on new materials and AI technology. I imagine sometimes I was like, oh, my life could have been like that, but
yeah,
so
I think we're all thinking about it at the moment.
Yeah. So I'm really hoping to bring that synergy back, being someone who can speak the language of both sides. And another thing, I previously also worked with AI scientists, so regarding like data visualization, I'm hoping that I can also bring it back to specifically on the water field. And yeah, what's more, I had previously collaborated with social scientists who are working on water governance. They're actually all master students. It's a very special group of people from the Geneva Graduate Institute. So they study international laws, international development and relations. And then the school does not have a program called water diplomacy. So anything to do with cross-boundary waters and local water management, it's a hidden. When we see a war outbreak or like a conflict between two countries, we might not be considering immediately, okay, this country is upstream of the river and they built a dam and they had all the powers, and we don't see these things immediately, but it's real, and sometimes it's the root cause of a conflict that can accumulate and become a war that we don't have yet, but it might be, with climate change, we might see them really come true. So a lot of these topics somehow become invisible. So in the school, you have the environmental committee that is very popular because everyone's all about sustainability, but then the water is like committed 5 people working together, and they really like try to build a curriculum substitute what the school didn't have, but it's their own passion. So it's really touching to see. And I remember, I was new to this field, but my first job was there, but it was more a scientific job. And then I went to watch a movie about water, and then I get to know the students and their interests, and then I continue working with them for the next solid 2 years, and almost the third year as well. And yeah, maybe 3 years. Sorry, I'm old. And then just like seeing like generations of students come in and go. So I was so some of my artworks were in collaboration with them, and they would write a topic on certain issues, water management, pollutions, restorations, and then we'll make a painting next to it. And yeah, so that's so far. And now there are some new ones coming up.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Charlotte. And that leads me to fostering dialogue around water and its challenges, because art has the ability to spark conversations and dialogue around environmental issues. It can encourage reflection, collaboration, as we've just seen, and collective action, obviously. So I wanted to ask you, I actually don't know if you exhibit, if you meet people directly, but I wanted to ask you, do you try to actively engage viewers in discussions about the role of water in our lives and the need to conserve and protect it? Is there an active dialogue that we engage in sometimes with the people who come to see your art?
You know, to be honest, I am only starting to make plans now, like solid strategies to do so. You know, it takes several years to build a body of an artworks as an artist, but to take it further as a work as artivist, right? And with building of meeting of waters. And I'm now starting to realize, hey, I cannot just rely on physical exhibitions. What about people who's never seen my work, right? And how can we have a campaign of such to really communicate things? And then previously, of course, each year I will have an art exhibition that was local. It's either in Geneva or France. And last year, I brought a body of work to Beijing. So one of besides my exhibitions, I also go to conferences. Okay, it's a bit of a messy thing I do. So that's why I'm kind of in the process of separating the three things I do. Right? I mean, first of all, my personal work, my personal art practice, creation, and then advocacy work. But then there is another type of work I do is like curation, putting up an exhibition altogether, right? And it's gonna fit somewhere. But then my dream is also to really create art exhibitions that are not only my work, but it's transmitting the message of water emotionally to the audience.
So about inspiring action. So as we've discussed, utilizing the water element in art can be a powerful tool to raise awareness and inspire action to protect the environment. I wanted to ask you if you have got any tangible examples of people who have been inspired to take action thanks to your artistic work. Have you ever got any feedback like this?
Yeah, I had a lot of feedback in terms of just this connection with water, or in fact, with meeting of waters, the idea is really to use art as a medium to bring people close to water, any water forms. It's like to sensibilize the audience. So we had very good feedback each time we organize the such performances in the audience. And then the survey that we conducted, you know, it was like people come in, they have maybe 2 out of 5 they know anything about water, or just do like it's just water, you know. And then coming out, it's like 5. It's like fully touched. And on another layer, when I was working, if I was with someone personally, you know, the survey was done, people come to the performance, but then on a personal level, if someone who knows me, knows about my obsession and my craziness about water, and also the life and career I've chosen for this, and then it's another story, and it really helped them to. I mean, I had a lot of um multiple of these kind of friends who told me. I mean, for Medium Water, I work with two DJs who are more like the mountain people, and then but then for the collaboration, they really get in touch with water, and one of them went on holidays and was collecting sounds of water in different parts of the island and oceans and streams, and they really collected the sound and then we brought it back together to make the art piece. And I was really touched. But then when it comes to really actions, it's really hard to say, you know, because I think this impact is rather subtle when you start caring for water. It's more like, because water does not have a representative. It's more, when you talk about war, we show pictures of the war scene of children. Everyone's heart cries out for the victims. And then when you talk about animal abuse, it's also very easy to emphasize. But then water is just water, right? And then how it's been treated, we don't really see anything wrong with the Thames being Thames. It's just how it looks from since when we were born, right? No one said anything about this, but how do we even allow, right? And when you have that initial contact with water, that's why the mission of Meeting of Water is really to restore humanity's connection and relationship with water, because with that first intact, we're able to move the ball to further things, like because water is a foundation to everything, especially environmentally, right? I mean, it's rather something you cannot predict. It's more like, okay, if we plant a seed about water, it's already a success. Let's see how it evolves in their lives.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, okay, maybe they're gonna save water a bit more, but it's not only that. It's not about saving the amount of water we use or without wasting it. It goes into how we care for the environment, how we treat each other. You know, it's all kinds of things, because water is so fundamental.
Yeah, and that's really why I was so interested to have this conversation with you today. You know, I loved what you said at some point about the purity of water, because sadly we do get used to pollution. And as you said, perhaps we are born, you know, with water already being polluted. You know, I'm from France, and we are still lucky, you know, we are lucky to have big mountains and to have sources of water that are still very pure. But it's becoming rarer and rarer. And even if you look, you know, at our rivers, the underground, our oceans, microplastics, for example, that we don't see with the visual eye, but there is so much pollution at play. And I love what you're saying about water doesn't have a representative, but we should all care about it because it is the source of life. It is so fundamental, as you say.
Oh, thank you.
So another topic I wanted to bring on, because there is so much we can discuss around the topic of water, obviously. And one is healing and transformation. And as soon as I started to look at this topic, you know, I had this song by Michael Jackson in mind called Heal the World. And he released it in 1992. And I remember it very well because I was at school. And with my friends, we loved it. And we kept, you know, singing it. So Michael Jackson said at the time that it's the song that he was actually the most proud of, the most proud to have created. And the lyrics are all about his wish for humanity of making the world a better place. So I think it goes well with our conversation. So water has soothing and calming qualities that are often associated with healing, transformation, and renewal. So open question and big question, do you believe that water has the power to heal us and our issues? You know, if we focus a bit more on it, as it is your call to action.
Wow, and if I would really love to believe so. You know, because water is so fundamental. If we were able to heal water issues, we probably gonna have real breakthroughs in medicine and in environment. And when it gets to human complexity, you know, it's really our hearts that is polluted. We have you know, sins, we have behaviors, we have good parts, good deeds, of course, but then it's constant in competition, like good and bad, right? And then I would believe it's not also the exterior, the purity of water externally, but also in our inner waters, our heart. How do we stay pure as water bodies, right? And it's a very, it seems like a very difficult process. But there are solutions. There's many proven paths towards purity. And me personally, I became a Christian a year ago, and I would never had thought chasing water would lead me to my religion 10 years later. And I used to think, you know, water must be God because it's the medium of life and everything. But then I realized that God created water, and God also gave us Jesus, who is the only one who can heal our hearts. And it was also then I stopped all my expensive therapy and yoga practices, and that didn't fix me but make things worse. And a lot of things were happening over the last year because I had to rebuild myself, so literally taking a sabbatical. So I do see things through a different lens now, but a positive one because I see solutions. And it's I think my spiritual state now really helped me to stay strong in my work externally on water. And it's perhaps somehow this two link of Christ and water happen like to meet eventually. You know, one is for the heart and the other one for our earthly world.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Charlotte. So I also wanted to explore with you indigenous wisdom, because I really love the relationship that, you know, indigenous peoples have with natural elements. And they often view water as a sacred element, essential for life and integral to their cultural traditions and spiritual beliefs. So that goes well with what you just said. Many indigenous communities have profound respect for water and see it as a living entity that sustains all life forms on Earth. And this perspective shapes their traditional practices and stewardship of water resources, something that perhaps we are very much missing in the modern world.
Yeah.
So have you ever looked or are you interested into that indigenous aspect in your work? So tell us if yes or not, and if not, would it be an aspect that you would be interested in exploring?
Definitely. I was very inspired by various sorts of indigenous cultures. Regarding water, I've taken some, I follow with some courses, lectures online from Australia, Oceania, and learning about how indigenous scientists today are restoring the local ecology, and also learning about how in some indigenous languages, water has several different names. They have their own identities, right? And the lake it's a different identity from the pond and from the river. You see them as, almost like different animals. They're all living entities, right? And that's just fascinating. And obviously today I believe, I don't know, I think because, okay, my own theory is, it's not even a theory, just observation. Just we as industrialized countries, right, including China, we all lost our indigeneity for several generations, but does not mean that we're not indigenous. We have this very popular term and a fascination for indigenous culture elsewhere without realizing that we are all indigenous to some lands. And I think that's my biggest struggle during COVID, because I feel like that's a period when people go back to their roots, and wherever you come from and you're stuck there, you're quarantined, or you're forced to move back. And I couldn't go back to China at the time, but I was in Switzerland. I just found Switzerland being a very precious country that is industrialized, but the indigenous Swiss are working in the government, they're working in every sectors, like they didn't lose that connection with their land. That's why they're willing to make all kinds of sacrifices to protect their water, protect their forests and the lands. It's just like a miracle how this country is functioning properly, being also wealthy and developed, and doing great work in the world. And I just found that I was respecting it, but in the meantime, I was like, who am I? Where do I come from? And through my art, I discovered, that lost link with water. When I look around in China today, like they're lost. In terms of sustainability, Asia is way behind, let's say Europe. Europe is probably the best hope I found in the world with the recent restoration laws. To be honest, there's another indigenous. I haven't really formulated, this properly, but indigenous European culture around water, which I read during my master's when I was just doing research on water. There's a forest guard called Victor Schauberger, who is today we would call him, indigenous, because he has no degrees. He's not a environmental scientist. He literally watches forests all his life, and he has this written. I think it was later on people wrote books in the name of him and published his writings. He has this exact same ideas as the Australian indigenous people say about water. He talks about living water. What makes water alive is this kind of movements. Water has this forward movement, but it also has this opposite direction. It has this vortex going inwards. It's energetic, and all of it so because when you take it into the context of science, you just can't explain. But it's the same thing as Chinese medicine. It's not scientific. It's not supposed to be science. Can you just let it be? It's indigenous knowledge. It's working in tangential to science. It's an indigenous knowledge we need to integrate in our worldview, in our everyday life and functioning as a society. Europeans are, somehow we, of course, I grew up in the Western world. I think like right now we're living in an age we're more open to it now because of, Chinese medicine, or like India and different like places we perceive as less industrialized, perhaps. But then without realizing that Asia is struggling too, with the same process of going into development, and yeah, and then the value system all changed. It's because of that disconnection, right? And I wish, I hope that, artists today can really make that bridge and bring people back to their indigenous knowledge, indigenous roots.
I think that's
Yeah.
a brilliant, brilliant message, Charlotte. I've never quite heard anybody say that before, through that angle, because you're right, we are so good at creating divisions between people, the indigenous people, the Western world, the Eastern world, etc. And I love what you're saying about, we all have a connection with the natural elements. That's how I interpret it, because, as you say, we've disconnected ourselves so much from the natural world in many ways that we are getting out of touch with it. When, as you say, we could all have or go back to being in touch with it the way indigenous people still are, which is why, there are so many discussions at the moment around indigenous peoples need to be part of the conversations. We need to tap into their wisdom. But really the main reason is because we are disconnected from it, and we need to get back in touch with it. And because these people thankfully still exist, they have something very valuable to bring to the table, and that's important to listen to their voice. Myself, I was really lucky to grow in a family very in touch with nature, with alternative medicine, even, because you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That probably gave me a different view. But I know people who are totally disconnected, from these things. And that's interesting. That's an interesting conversation to have and to amplify. And again, it's reconnecting. Yes, we are different, but not so different, because, we are all human. We are all in touch with the natural elements, and we can all go back to that. And this is when the artistic discussion with you is interesting as well, because art can really help you get more in touch with your emotions and with that type of thing. So that's really interesting. So I wanted also to finish on indigenous thinking, talk about the cost of water, because many indigenous cultures advocate for the idea that water should be freely accessible to everyone and not commodified or priced for profit like we do in the Western world, at least. And they believe in the inherent right of all living beings to clean water, and argue that it should be protected and shared among all members of the community. So this philosophy obviously contrasts with Western notions of water as a commodity, subject to market forces. So I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion about it? Should water have a price tag? Should it be free?
Yes, you're asking the right person. Water's got a voice through me.
Yes. You are the representative of water for sure.
I feel like, it's such a complex, right? And me being a human, but also being an artist who feel water so intimately. When I was such a, just like a young activist for several years. I hated Coca-Cola, and I never bought a plastic water bottle. And I even lectured anyone who, like just being young, like back then. But now, like, I think I'm past the phase where I'm more practical and just also like a little bit more professional. And like, and then when it talks about issues like bottled water, I think, I'm more accepting water being integrated into capitalist system, because this is everyday life. And it's just like even grassroots have to, have the bridge with governmental organizations, believing that we all have the good intentions, right? I mean, we're all trying to resolve the biggest humanitarian crisis, environmental crisis that we're facing. And if we're goals are aligned, then we should be able to speak each other's languages and adapt. Of course, if I were, I mean, like if I were to answer these questions emotionally or more authentically, I would be questioning, because my dream is to build a water museum, right? I mean, if I receive a big funding from Avian and they ask to to put their logo on the museum, I was like, no, it's for water. It's not for Avian. You guys already make huge profits from water. Like, I would feel so angry, like inside, right? I mean, that's where I am, like personally, but I've learned to somehow also adapt to the system. I think it's what water does if we can learn from it. It's just kind of, if you put it's famous quote from Bruce Lee, right? If you put water in a teapot, it becomes tea. And then like all that stuff, just water adapts to all kinds of shapes. And so the question really goes back to the human heart, because we're sinners, and if we don't work on our sin, and if we don't come to God every day, and then we just go back to, because there's a constant spiritual warfare between the good and bad, and then we'll be making decisions sacrificing our integrity, right? I mean, it's easy to say, oh, it's our life, it's our freedom, but then the responsibilities, the good deeds that we've planted in, and I think that's what makes bad decisions in life. It's not the system, it's not capitalism, it's definitely not water itself. It's the action and intention behind all of this. So it goes back to the human heart again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I talked about that earlier, but I really wish anyone would have the experience of drinking very pure water, because it does taste different, first of all. And there is such an incredible feeling about it. I couldn't even put words into it, but as you say, we have polluted water so much, and we always, I think I had this discussion with other guests on the podcast, we always try to create new solutions to problems, and then we had another problem, and then we had another solution and another problem. When really it's also about going back to the basics and looking at water as such a precious element. And how can we, how can we give it the importance it deserves? And perhaps that's not through a price tag, as you say. Perhaps it's through the heart. Perhaps it's through other elements. But that's a big discussion. That's probably an endless discussion. So if we look at the interconnectedness of all life forms, obviously that's something that links to water very much. And it also emphasizes the importance of preserving water as a common good for present and future generations. And there's so much at stake that perhaps people don't realize that has to do with water as a resource, and a very precious resource for everybody. So I wanted to ask you, how do you look at the interconnectedness related to water? Are there any particular connected relationships through water that interest you more or matter more to you? And could you perhaps give us an example? Because with your both artistic and scientific background, you probably see the connections of water in the world with different eyes. So I'm very interested to have your view.
Yeah, I'm actually just working on that.
Okay.
And yeah, I feel like I have this incomplete image in my head that, you know, life, because we have now the satellite, we've been to the moon, and we know what the Earth looks like since then, and then we have all the satellite image of the Earth, and then and our cartography history is really, we discovered continents and the land, and then the oceans is this fluffy thing. But then I started to have this view, you know, everything comes from water, right? And then the water, like the ocean, is this gigantic soup. I mean, I haven't formulated where the ocean comes from because, you know, historically there's this big flood, right, that covers everything. It's not just in the Old Testament, but every like culture nearly there was a flood that we actually had enough water to cover all the
and
all the
continents.
land.
Yeah.
And then where did the water go, right? I mean, after the flood, so there's enough water. There is the same amount of water since Earth creation, never gone anywhere, and it just kind of constantly circulates, right? I mean, it's just so crazy to think about that. And I heard from sources that we've been thoroughly circulated like how many times? It's like a small number. I was really surprised. I don't know if it's like a confidential answer, but this connection, you know, like what connects water is the circulation, is movements. So it goes back to our conversation from the beginning, and it's fascinating me so much. And I have this incomplete image in my head that I just want to build a worldview, a world map from water, because we are water bodies carrying salted water in our body. We drink fresh water, but we consume, you know, salts from different food sources. So we are similarly to the components of the ocean. And when we cry, or our tears are actually salted. And it's like such a beautiful image in my head. And I just want us to like to somehow like transform how we see ourselves. We're actually so dependent on our water sources that we are just an extension of our lake, our rivers, right? And if we live in a coastal area, it's the rainfall or the groundwater, which is less frequently circulated. I know rain is okay, but then groundwater is very, very limited. It's actually pretty vulnerable to not have I don't know. It's just like I'm having this image in my head, and also sea salination, right? And what if we can all visualize the population as being one type of water, and then the freshwater sources being, you know, the mother of this water, and you can also visualize the industries that consumes water. We call virtual water, right? The products that we make, it all comes from some sources. And then but then we also recycle water artificially, right? And to use sewage to, you know, and to wash the streets and all that. I mean, just it's artificial circles as well. So like I sort of, you know, my physics brain zooms out and see like, oh, everything is just like this water cycles, and it just goes on forever, ever. And like I want to make this like visualization of water, but right now I'm starting something small. It might be a live project. Never know.
Yeah. And I like also this reference that, you know, we learned that at school, that nothing is created, nothing is lost, everything is transformed. Yeah. And I think that applies so well to water. And I love, like the circulation of water since the beginnings of time. So that's a nice image. I like that. So a few more questions. I wanted to ask you about exhibitions. I think you did mention that's part of your work. I wanted to ask you, do you have any at the moment or any upcoming ones? where people can see your work. I obviously loved your mention of the water museum for the future as an idea. Definitely want to visit that one. But what about other exhibitions?
I don't yet have any dates on an exhibition because I do have a body of work in Asia, and apart from last year the water conference in Beijing, I have some work still here, but I don't have the dates yet. On top of that, I do want to have a dedicated, like a more permanent space dedicated to water through arts and different artists working on a theme. This is a dream that can come true quickly because I've been working on this for a while, and then had a prototype last year. And right now, I think
Where would that be if you do that? Would that be in Switzerland or somewhere else?
it would be in Switzerland, initially planned, but anything can happen, it really depending on the support. But we wanted to make it in Switzerland because I think it's a good example and the water management and how the relationship with water is it's a good example for the world in Switzerland. However, the dream is really to open up such museum in every country, every major city possible to emphasize the theme. And this is not a museum that's a traditional one that we imagine, okay, there's artifacts and maybe like science museum, but no, it's actually an art museum, and then things are represented through art because the art is the language of emotions, and to resonate with water is an emotional job. It's not about readings and stuff. So it's a long vision, a big vision, long project.
Yeah, I love it. We all need a big vision, and then you take steps towards it, and who knows where it will lead you? We never know. I also wanted to ask you, have you created live performances in the past, inviting people into your artistic experience more closely? I'm also asking you, I don't know why I have this picture of you in mind, where I think I've seen you painting or creating a large mural in the past.
Yes, the painting behind me actually were created in public in Central Park in New York City. It was actually very sad. Another like sad river, in New York City. I just felt like I was carrying the burden of industrialization of the river, and it was also pouring outside end of the UN water conference, where so many people came with their different agendas and you see all the fancy suited people coming to the conference from all around the world, thousands of people. As a youth, I was part of the youth delegate, but I wasn't with the youth all the time. I had I felt like it was a good energy through the youth over there, but there's so many contradictions in this conference, and yeah, it was a very good example is like I was facilitating a panel between youth and like government officials. So there was a youth representative from Fiji talking about the pollutions in their country, and then the water basically became properties of these big companies. And then the minister of, I think it was the Minister of Environment of Fiji, came in late, and then he spoke, and then he had a bottle of Fiji water bottle on the table, and he was perhaps proud of it, thought I was representative. I was just like, Oh no, it was so sad, so sad.
Oh yeah, but yeah, that's nice that you do some of these life experiences. I think it's a great way to, convey messages in a more one-to-one, way. That's really
Yeah,
nice.
it was more like a self-therapy among several of us, like to release all of these
Yeah.
crazy experiences we don't know where to put. It's just like, seeing the world, the real world for the first time.
Well, I actually don't know if this question is relevant to you if you're Chinese, but are you a water sign in astrology?
I don't know, but I
Okay.
think one day I checked a website like that's Chinese astrology, Chinese zodiac. Right? It's by
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And then even
It's
though
not
you
the
got the
same.
animal, there's also there's five elements. Um the one extra element is metal, and there's also the yin and yang.
Yeah.
So attached to the dates you were born. So I'm a rooster, and I'm in water, and I'm yin. So that's the
Yeah.
best, I think, the most fitting zodiac that I have. But I mean, like otherwise, I don't know my star sign, Capricorn with rising Gemini or something. I'm not super
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, because you feel so deeply, your work. I was actually wondering. So, top three picks. What are perhaps three pieces of art that you have created that you are the most proud of, and why? If you pick three.
I told you like the work I don't like sell really well, and the ones my favorite probably never gonna sell.
Really?
It's just my own decorations. So two paintings were created with medium waters, which I can share with you in our article later, and they're created live with performance and storytelling on the glaciers and the oceans. So they actually created conductive canvases. So I covered the canvas. It's a meter 20 in diameter, and then they are covered with black ink that are conductive, and I connect this canvas with a gadget that I bought. It's a Berlin-based company, basically, that they transmit like signals into sound. There's processing already. It's a very tiny gadget. So I just bought this, and I use it to like plug it into, like there's a simple software I was experimenting on my own, and then you can hear the difference by changing something like on the software, and also different pressure on the touches. But then because you are creating a circuit with water, because I use ink and my body is conductive, and you actually whenever I press on the canvas, I make a sound. So these two paintings were created as a musical piece as well. I was collaborating with DJs who were taking charge of music during the performance. So I was able to focus on painting it, just feeling it, and gathering emotions from the audience, while the others are telling stories. I mean, there is a whole integrated. We call it
Loving
reciprocal
it.
performance because it's a multi-sensorial learning experiences about water and what's emerged in the audience emotionally. I also absorb them and create into the painting. So we call it reciprocal in that way. And these two paintings took very many months to complete afterwards because the performance only gave it a shape.
Yeah.
So that's just the story behind these two paintings. And
Really.
other than, yeah, these two I really love you to see. And then we have a video um recorded of our performance as well. So each time we try to tell a full story of the water bodies, and other than that, I think when I'm working on my own this year, I was told by this Chinese gallerist that I have improved my technique. So I sent you a third one of something I like from this year. It's also, yeah. I mean, I like them, but there's one I made this year on another conference in I like work that has stories to tell. So I had this roll 2 meters long. It's about maybe 60 width. So it's a very impractical scroll. And I just carry it to this international cooperation conference of Switzerland. So the Swiss government have this conference every year where anyone can register from the country and even outside the country, and they pay for the accommodations and stuff. And SDC, so since our collaboration, they invited me back a year ago as a youth speaker, but this year I volunteered myself again, and I had a little booth for Meeting of Waters, and then I decided to bring this row of painting, and I was with another NGO called the Water Museum. It's in a Swiss-German part, and then we actually made a bridge between our booth by laying down this long river of water. And then actually the theme of the conference is peacemaking, peace and water, right? I mean, water is a peace building tool, can be very often, but it can also create wars. The big part of this conference is on water, and a lot of specialists as well were giving talks. So this painting literally symbolizes to me, I gave the story, it's like, because it's black background and it's white ink, therefore it's like the river of hope in the darkness. Yeah, that's another.
Yeah. So
really
hopefully we can put that one in the article as well. I love that. Yeah, I can visualize something already. Thank you so much, Charlotte. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, and also like the people were jumping over the painting because it was literally in the way. I mean, it was I almost forgot to tell you, like, this is like, maybe this is a new form of activism that I found out, because it's like literally in the way. People were stepping on my paintings, and then some of them realize it and they jump over it, and then we have a video of people just like, some of them just like not looking and stepping into. It's like putting nature in the way of humans, right? I mean, like, you have to respect the river somehow.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's a good story, actually. Wow.
And then I remember the former president of Switzerland, and he was in a rush going to a conference, and then literally just like, I just like almost yelled out, mind the river, and then he jumped over. With his several assistants following him, just all jumped over the painting. I wish I had a film of it. It was so cute.
Here we go. So last question for you, Charlotte. Thank you. And I can't wait, to put an article together with the visuals of your art, because, visual connection matters. That's why I want to have the article in addition to the podcast. And I love also some of the associations you formed with music, with sounds of water, as we discussed. It's really interesting. So last question, I always end this podcast with the same question, to know you from a different angle. If you were a color, what would it be and why?
I was like, when I saw this question, I was just like, Why does she have to ask that? I don't know. It would be too lame to say I'm blue. So I choose brown. I
Oh,
think
why
it's a
brown?
very, yeah, I just feel like brown deserve more love as a color.
So
It's
what type of brown? Can you describe the brown you would
like
choose?
soil brown, right? I mean, like the brown of soil. I don't know, like why I just felt like it's a color that gives a lot of a sense of safety, and it's also very humble. It doesn't compete with any other colors, so it's overlooked. But it's the color of our soil. It's also a mix of all the colors, and you get brown. When you make a mistake in the painting, you get brown.
I like that. I've been told water and earth will actually work well together because, you know, they work
Yeah,
hand in hand.
yeah.
So I think that
So
brings a beautiful balance. Perfect. So thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing with us the connection between your art and water as an element for this conversation. It was a pleasure to have you.
thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Um, yeah, and if I can summarize some of our conversation, you are showing us clearly that through artistic expression, we can deepen our appreciation for water's essential role in sustaining life, fostering creativity, and nurturing a sense of interconnectedness with the natural world. And I do hope that this conversation will resonate with many people and serve as a catalyst for inspiring them to appreciate and protect water resources, because as we discussed throughout, water is so essential. So thank you again. This podcast is available on YouTube in video form, but also on Apple Podcasts in audio form. So choose the one that you prefer to watch or listen for people. Thank you to everyone for being there. There will be an article about Charlotte's work on scarletredmagazine.com. So you can discover more of her work, and I will add links to our own websites in the show notes. Thank you.
Ingrid, for creating such a platform. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Charlotte.